Part of a first aid kit that I'm going to talk about is activated charcoal. Activated charcoal is one of those substances, it's not really a plant-derived matter, it can be, that I would suggest every first aid kit has, and especially in travelers' first aid kits. So it's the kind, if you're doing a lot of healthcare, if you're doing it working at a big event someplace, you want to make sure you have a big backstock of activated charcoal and then small amounts to give people. I'll be talking about the different forms of activated charcoal, including just charcoal itself, and some of the ways of getting it in people. But activated charcoal is one of the substances that I learned about maybe 10 years ago, and I've used extensively ever since then. It is just really helpful and very non-toxic for a wide variety of first aid circumstances. So first, let's define it. So charcoal is just another word for carbon. So it's basically burnt organic matter. There's charcoal, and then there's activated charcoal. Charcoal is usually what you see. So none of this is charcoal briquettes in supermarkets, which I'm not actually sure what they are, but they're often fused with petroleum product, so they light easy. So don't use those for medicine. And then the other form that's just charcoal is if you burn wood and make a fire, two things will be left. If you burn it hot, you'll get ash, which is the gray powder, and you get these black lumps, and that's charcoal. Those black lumps can be used in emergency. They can be used. They're not poisonous, but they're not nearly as strong as activated charcoal. So I just want to say right off the bat that if you need to, in some of these things and you don't have activated charcoal, you can probably use the just the burnt wood, as long as it's not the ash, that it's the charcoal, the lumps of black left. Also, you can buy activated charcoal for pet filters, for water tanks and such. I don't really know the quality of that. I buy activated charcoal in the mail. Actually, buy it from companies that have the name activated charcoal in their URL, in their title. And they're all usually equally good, and it's really very inexpensive if you buy it in bulk. So as I get into activated charcoal, one thing that it is quite affordable unless you buy it in stores and you buy like one of these small bottles that has like 14 or 15 or 30 capsules for 15 bucks. That is incredibly expensive. What I'm going to buy it is an 8-pound container. It's just very light stuff. So an 8-pound container for like $40. So 3 times the price of what you get is like 1,000. I don't know how the difference. So from a couple of teaspoons for $15 to a big container for about $40. So I'm really suggesting to buy activated charcoal. I buy it online, but any place you can get a good deal with it. It's commonly sold. It's a legal, common item, but don't buy it in containers. Much more money. All right. So what is activated charcoal? So charcoal is the organic leftover bits of burnt stuff. Activated charcoal is if you burn the same stuff. It could be wood. It could be it could be bone. It could be sphagnum moss. Actually, one of the most common things burnt for in the industrial world is that you take one of these things and you subject it to high heat and low oxygen. In other words, lots of heat, but a slow burn time due to the lack of oxygen. What happens when you do this is that the charcoal grains, each tiny speck of charcoal, starts to develop more porous surface area. So if I drew a piece of activated charcoal, and if this was the activated charcoal, one grain, like a grain of sand, what happens if it's not activated, you have a couple of pore surfaces. These little circles are pores. When you activate it, you just get many more. I don't know why they use the word activated. It's just a word used. Basically, superheated, excluding oxygen, you get many more pore surfaces. That matters because each one of those pore surfaces holds a molecule of usually the kind of thing you're trying to get rid of in your body. So let's say a bacterial infection or a venom. So I haven't said how activated charcoal is used yet, but I'm saying that those pore surfaces, each pore surface holds a molecule of something you're trying to get rid of, and that's why you're taking activated charcoal. So charcoal works, but activated charcoal works much better, but they work on the same principle. So why use activated charcoal? And the answer is it is a fantastic adsorbent. So an adsorbent is basically a solid absorbing a liquid, so an adsorbent. And activated charcoal is just one of the best of them. Basically, the body of activated charcoal holds strongly a wide variety of substances. So it bonds chemically with many different substances, and that is the beauty of it. But it doesn't bond very strongly with water. So here's why I'm going to give a for instance, and then we'll talk about its many applications. You might use activated charcoal internally or externally, but let's say internally because you drank some bad water and maybe you have giardia. And giardia is protozoas that live in you for a while. So the activated charcoal might not actually kill the giardia living in your large intestine, your small intestine, the end of your small intestine. But what it can do is bind the waste products that the giardia make as they're eating your food supply, as they're attached into the large intestine. So what it does, what activated charcoal does, that's just one for instance, is that when you put it in your mouth, so I'm going to kind of take this from a beginning prose. When you put it in your mouth, everything you drink of activated charcoal is eventually going to come out the other side. We do not absorb activated charcoal. All of it that goes in your mouth comes out your rectum in time. All this is going to fit into pieces of why it's so useful. So to put it very differently, if you have a cold or a flu and you take activated charcoal, it doesn't do anything because colds and flus are not in the lumen. They're not in the hollow space of your mouth and your rectum. They're in your cells. They're in your bloodstream. So activated charcoal only works for things that it comes into direct contact with. Activated charcoal only works for things it comes into direct contact with. So if you have a respiratory virus, you have a cold or flu, and you take a bunch of activated charcoal thinking it'll kill it, it can't touch it. That stuff is systemic, or it's in your bloodstream, or it's really in your lungs, the tissue surrounding your lungs or sinus cavities. The activated charcoal is not there. So when people talk about activated charcoal being a blood purifier, it doesn't really make any sense because it doesn't get into your blood. Blood purification is something that's kind of odd anyway. So that's a whole other topic. But what activated charcoal does thoroughly and really nicely is all the stuff you put in your mouth will bind to certain substances in your mouth, in your esophagus, in your stomach, in your small intestine, and your large intestine. And whatever it binds to will not get reabsorbed into your body. Rather, it's going to pass out in your stool or in your diarrhea. So if you have, for instance, diarrhea, and you got it from drinking bad water, and you don't know what it was or eating bad food, all you know is that you have liquid, urgent stools. Activated charcoal is a reasonable thing to try because as it passes, any of the noxious ingredients that are creating this situation might bind with the pores with the activated charcoal to be then carried out of your body. And the beauty of activated charcoal is it tends to bind stronger with a bunch of these alien presences in our body, these toxins, rather than things like water. Because if it bound with water, it would go in your stomach, bind with water, and that's all it would absorb. It would be saturated. But in fact, it has low saturation, low molecular bonding with water, and higher molecular bonding with other substances. So when you put it in your mouth and it goes into your GI tract, it starts to absorb and interact with a wide variety of substances that you don't want there. So it is phenomenally useful. It is a kick-ass remedy for lots of different disorders that have to do with things that you ate or drank and that feel bad in you and are starting infections in your GI tract, but in the lumen. So back to the whiteboard for a minute. The lumen, when I use the word lumen, it's important here. The lumen in your body are the hollow spaces. So like here's your esophagus goes down, and the inside of this is all your tissue, the esophagus, the inside is the lumen, and then you might come into the stomach, and the stomach is the lumen, the inside of the stomach, this part is the lumen, and then like your small intestine and large intestines. And so when I talk about lumens, I'm talking about the hollow space. So the hollow space in your lungs, the hollow space in your bladder, the hollow space in your GI tract, those are called lumen. The word lumen is the same word as illuminate and Lucy and Lucifer. It all means to brighten up or illuminate. I don't know how, well, you can go into your own religious underpinnings on this kind of thing. But basically, when you see illuminate, lumen, and Lucy, all of those things mean to bring a lot of light. as an illuminate. So the lumen, if you shine a flashlight and if you can drag it out big enough in your mouth, right, it's going to put a beam all the way through the middle. That's the light part of hollow structures. So activated charcoal, if you put it in your mouth, it's just going to continue, not get reabsorbed in your body, and pull material up along the way. So one of its main uses is for digestive problems where there's an infection. Now, if you have loose stools because of stress, it won't touch it. It's not good for the nervous tissue. If you have loose stools because of something deeper inside your body, it won't help. It won't help with chronic inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. Those have nothing to do with infectious material, probably, not right? Irritating. So what you're going to use it for is if you've ate or drank something and it's living in you and creating disruption, that's the place for activated charcoal. So as I mentioned a while ago when I said if you have to just bring a few things with you on a trip, I would suggest activated charcoal, because if you eat something bad, you want to start taking it immediately and take all that you have, whatever form you have it in. Just start flushing it out. One of the important things to know about activated charcoal, we'll talk about how to take it internally, but your stools after taking activated charcoal will be midnight black. So it'll be the black of the cameras that I'm facing right here. So you have to, it's not blood, it's nothing to worry about, but because you're going to evacuate all the activated charcoal you ate, that's going to come out black. And sometimes it can be scary because also congealed blood, if you have internal bleeding, has a blackish color. And most people don't generally poop black. So just know that's the color of activated charcoal. So the first use is just that, for digestive infectious problems. Later on, I'm going to do a class, a series here. We're going to talk about treating a whole bunch of endoparasites that create diarrhea, for instance, Shigella, Giardia. But for now, I just want to say activated charcoal is helpful for a wide variety of them. The other thing that activated charcoal is useful for, as far as first aid care, is for any kind of infection. Activated charcoal could actively hold some infectious bacteria. So it's one of the things with staph wounds. One of the things we use in staph wounds is there's a whole bunch involved in staph. But one thing is occasionally putting on activated charcoal poultices. Remember, a compress is a tea. When you stick the tea in and put that on, a poultice is when you take the substance and you put it on directly. So this is a poultice. You take the activated charcoal and moisten it, and then you put that directly on an open wound. And if it's infectious, it can hold some of the bacteria or some of the bacterial wastes. So activated charcoal is very helpful for certain kinds of wounds and infections. With all these things, it might not work, and then it might get worse. And so there's other considerations as well. The other place, though, that is also handy is if you have venomous spider bites. So I only mean the cytotoxic spider bites. There's neurotoxic black widows and cytotoxic brown recluses and hobo spiders. If you get bit by one of those, usually you know the difference. We'll talk a little bit about it later. As the cytotoxic spider bites, often the skin starts to fall apart and it shows an infection, but basically your skin is sloughing off as the toxin, as is meant to do with spider venoms and snake venoms, is eating away at the flesh. So another place, particularly for those kinds of spider bites, like brown recluse, is you make, later on we'll show you how to make these, how to make it activated charcoal poultice, but right now just saying just get it on there, keep it on there, and it can soak up some of the venoms as well. So all these things, by the way, are not just natural. They're commonly used by medical personnel all over the place. Activated charcoal is used a lot for helping pull stuff out of the body. Sometimes for certain kinds of poisonings it's helpful. So it's really a very useful substance. Some of the tricky things, right? Some of the non-tricky things are use it if you think you have digestive infectious material, use it if you have infection externally or if you have some venomous bite. You might need to use other stuff too. Right. And everything I say, it might not be enough and you might have to kick it up. But the problems with it, it's non-toxic, but it's not the easiest substance to work with. It is a black powder and it's very light. And when you open the container up, so let's say I have a container, open it up, the slightest wind will start to blow around, and because it's such minute granules, it just sticks in your pore. So you kind of get, it just makes you look like you're dirty. And in fact, you are dirty. So it's not a big deal, but for someone like myself who's trying to maintain a sense of cleanliness, I just rather not get activated charcoal all over me because it doesn't come out that easy. When you wash, it doesn't come off easy because it's kind of in the pores. So it's not toxic. It's just a little bit annoying. It will slough off as soon as your skin starts sloughing, as it chronically does. So meaning that, small pieces of skin flakes coming off. But it's just, it's just messy stuff. The other thing besides the black stool is when you drink it, and we'll talk about how to drink it. When you drink it, your teeth get black and your tongue get black. And so when the next time you smile at somebody, you will look basically like an extra in Michael Jackson's Thriller. So then you can start doing a dance or something, right? And start singing Thriller. And that might be a lot of fun. But just so if people start looking at you funny, it's because your teeth are probably stained black and your tongue is, but it's temporary. It's not a problem except for how it looks at the moment. You don't want to breathe a lot of it in, so if you open it up, you don't want to huff activated charcoal because once again it'll go in your lungs and your lungs have to slough it out. But that's an exaggeration and not common, and so otherwise pretty easy to use. So how to use it? I'll demonstrate later how to make a bandage and how to put a plaster and how to put activated charcoal. But to make a drink with it, if you're going to drink it, remember I do use capsules, but I'm trying to save money and so I'm going to use it in bulk form, is that what you do is first you get a glass, you put water in it, just like with tinctures, then you put the activated charcoal in, but you put it in slow. What happens, if you have a cup and you put the activated charcoal in, and you pour water in it, the convection current of the water or whatever fluid going in tends to push out the activated charcoal. It's just very light. It's very fine grain. So put some water in, add a little activated charcoal, stir, add a little activated charcoal, and just stir it in that way. So it's very simple. And so the amounts used. So if you think you have a digestive upset caused by cryptosporidium or some kind of giardia, some infectious organism, I suggest initially taking large doses and something like a teaspoon, so a teaspoon of activated charcoal, put it into a cup with water, stir it in, and just drink the whole thing down. It actually doesn't taste very bad. It's a chalky, metallic texture. But as somebody who is quite aware of how awful most things taste, actually doesn't taste bad, but the texture, again, is chalky and metallic. And some people don't like it. But it's not very bitter. It's not bitter at all. It's bland is what it is. So initially, like if you went someplace and you drank some stream water that somebody said was good, and all of a sudden somebody next to you is starting to have the poops, I would say start drinking activated charcoal right away. And I would suggest that 1 or 2 teaspoons initially, and then 1 teaspoon in some water every 3-4 hours for the first day, and then maybe 1 teaspoon 2 or 3 times the second day, and then maybe half a teaspoon the third day. But really a part of it is waiting to see how symptoms abate. So I'm suggesting like a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons the first time in as much water as necessary to make it liquidy. Drink it down, being aware that all those other considerations. Then probably do it 3 more times or so the first day, 4 times. You're going to have very liquid stools, very black. And then your second day, maybe having a teaspoon twice. Your third day, maybe having a half a teaspoon twice that day. And then just using as necessary. If you're putting it on staph or infections, you put it on the infection and let it sit usually for at least half a day to 1 day before changing it, giving it a chance to absorb. Remember, it makes a tight bond, so it's not going to just go back and forth, the bacteria or whatever is growing there. So those are some of the aspects of activated charcoal. We'll make some bandages. And so once to go over again its main uses, for food poisoning, by food poisoning I mean food and water poisoning. So if you've had some salmonella or something that you ate, as long as it's in the lumen of your GI tract, it can be helpful. Animal bites where you get bit and you have bacteria in there. Venomous bites like a spider bite or a scorpion bite, as long as it can reach it and pull it up. Staph infections. It's also, by the way, used for people who have chronic halitosis. And halitosis is bad breath. There's lots of reasons for bad breath. For instance, you could have stuff growing in your gums. But for some people who actually have very strong breath because of just fermentation in their lower GI or their stomach. The activated charcoal can absorb some of that and actually help there. It's just another thing. That's its most common use, by the way, in the capsules. If you want to make capsules, it really is much easier to take it in capsules, though often you're taking 3 to 5 at a time. What I would suggest is getting one of those cap them machines, just a small, one of those things that basically, it's a lot of work. So get some people who owe you a favor. Get them to make these capsules. If you can make a few hundred capsules, as many capsules as you need, it's really, when you have the capsules, it's easy to give them. And you get better compliance because then you tell the people, here, just take 4 capsules twice a day rather than putting it in water and getting all messy and all of that. And I think that covers the basic premises of activated charcoal. Really, consider bringing it with you all the time for digestive upsets, for infections. Those are 2 primary uses, and they're very common. So, thanks.